First thing is the approval of the agenda.
Move approval. Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Jim, second by Kevin to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Other than we're gonna move it around a little bit, there's some items that we're gonna move up. We're gonna move item number 13 up to item number 2. If that's okay with the motion.
That's fine with my motion.
Okay.
Yes.
Approval of the minutes from July 14th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Grant, second by Kevin to approve the minutes of July 14th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bills to be paid. Vouchers.
Second.
Motion by Cheney, second by Grant to approve the bills. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. With that, we're gonna move from we're moving item number 13 up to item number 2.
Did you do the citizens to be heard? I didn't.
Oh, Scar, excuse me. Do we have anybody?
None, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, we have item number 13 is appointment, reappointment of board members to the Buffalo Red Watershed District. And last week we had interviews for that. And this week we'll vote on, we've got 2 3-year appointments and one 1-year appointment. At this time, I think we'll take them each separately, as we did before with the interviews.
Mr. Chair,
Pardon?
Mr. Chair, I think of the 3 we had one that expressed in his application that he would prefer the 1 year.
Yes.
So I would move Paul Kravinoff be appointed effective immediately to fill out that term.
Second.
Is that, you talking about the 1-year term?
Yes.
Okay, we got a motion to approve Paul Kavanaugh to the 1-year term, by Kevin, second by Grant. Any further discussion? All in favor of the vote?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we've got 2 more appointments to be made.
Mr. Chair, I'm making a motion to appoint Mark Anderson to term.
Okay, we got a motion to appoint Mark Anderson to, reappoint Mark Anderson to a 3-year term. I'll second that motion. Any discussion?
I think for the record, Representative Paul Marquardt sent a letter of support for Mr. Anderson's involvement on the watershed, but also having served with him on the governor's task force, I think he represents the district and his area well.
I guess I too feel that he sort of I felt a bit uncomfortable with his diversion and stuff like that, but I felt that he had a reason for not doing it, and so I do support him for the position. Any further discussion? Okay, I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion fails. Okay, now we got a final one. We got
Mr.
one
Chair.
more 3-year term.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that we reappoint Jerry Van Amberg to a 3-year term.
Second.
We got a motion by Kevin, second by Grant to appoint Jerry Van Amberg to reappoint Jerry Van Amberg to a 3-year term. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay.
Mr. Chair, in terms of clarification, if we don't appoint one of those positions and we need to make an appointment by the end of August, correct? Is that what was advertised?
Yes, by statute, we had to advertise and do the interview process. The board does have some leeway in the event that they do not have a suitable candidate, which the board voted today that they did not in this case. So they would have the ability to go out and re-advertise again, and interview and make that appointment.
Okay,
So because that deadline is coming up, that's probably an advertisement that we'll need to make.
Yes.
okay.
Do we need to authorize you to do that, or?
It would probably be good to have a motion on that.
I'll make a motion to re-advertise the position.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Grant, second by Jim to re-advertise the position for the Watershed Board, Buffalo Watershed Board. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
In terms of a further comment, Mr. Chair, if I may.
go ahead.
I think that there is a diversity in terms of land represented in the watershed, specifically in Clay County, and I think it is imperative that we have a local grower on that board. The two people that we appointed today, while they understand drainage and water issues both in the city and in the rural areas, it's very important that we have a farmer on that board, specifically for Clay County. And so just, I implore us to look for growers because Mark was a good member.
Okay. With that, we'll go into our COVID-19 update, our weekly COVID-19 update. Got Kathy, Cheryl, and Jamie.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. You do have the handouts of our current case information. And the first single page is the Minnesota numbers. So we have almost 52,000, 51,800 positive cases throughout the state of Minnesota. 650 are their newly reported cases. The number of deaths, last week was 1,545, and this week it's 1,576 with 2 new reported cases. And then our Clay County numbers, we have currently 707 positive cases for those newly reported, 39 deaths. We did have that same number for a number of weeks, as you can see on the second page. So, and then no new reported deaths since that last one. So we have, of course, the 970,700 completed tests throughout the state. So they're continuing to do a large number of testing. The hospitalizations on that, on the Minnesota one, is just the Minnesota hospitalizations, the 4,900. We don't have the numbers of hospitalizations for Clay County residents in Sanford or Essentia, which is where the majority of our citizens receive their health care.
Do we keep them separate then when they go over there?
Yeah, we don't get a number from Sanford and Essentia of the Clay County residents that are hospitalized, so we don't have an accurate count, I should say. We'd have to be checking with them pretty regularly. That's not something they provide for us. And then the age categories, and of course the largest number initially for us was in our long-term care residents, and I know Commissioner Haney asked about our last week you asked about the percentage and why we're a bit high. We did have a large number initially of cases in long-term care and those kinds of settings. And then the numbers are so low too to have a good sampling of why our positives are so high. So Minnesota Department of Health, other than just the initial ramp up of cases in long-term care, is the only explanation they really have, because our percentage is a bit higher.
That's what I suspected.
Pardon me?
That's what I suspected.
Oh, yes. In North Dakota, I don't have that list on the forms here, but The number of confirmed cases in North Dakota is 5,986. And just because it's, a sister state to us, it's interesting to keep track of what those numbers are looking like. Like in North Dakota, there's 99 deaths. And then in Cass County, there's 2,841 confirmed cases just in Cass County, and 75 deaths. So their numbers are going up a bit as well. So we're just kind of following what the numbers are in Cass County specifically. So as we're working together on that Red River Valley Task Force and sharing information and data. And the second page, the 2-page handout that I gave you just shows kind of from the beginning and just number of confirmed cases, those no longer needing isolation. So the 707 cases, 652 not needing isolation. And so right now 16. And these numbers, if you keep track of what we had last week and the week before, they are ever evolving as Minnesota continues to add the data on those sheets. So they're not an exact number, but they're close to the information as of to date. And the travel, the likely exposures, you're seeing the various ways that there's likely exposure. The reason why the travel outside of Minnesota seems like it may be a bit higher than it has been, they're counting travel into North Dakota as well. So raises that percentage up just a bit. And the age categories for our Clay County cases, it's still the highest number in the 30 to 39 range and 23 to 29. So it's still a fair number of young people, and we anticipate when the campuses, the higher ed students come back, we'll be monitoring that closely and working with them as we may see cases increase with those students coming into our community. Any questions on those?
There's no plan to really check those students as they're coming back, is there?
We've been communicating with Minnesota Department of Health, and they still are standing firm on they will not be testing students that are coming to higher ed. Part of it is the large number of students across the state of Minnesota, and they just don't have the means or the vendors to do that much testing, so they're just not going to. They're instead going to be ensuring that higher ed, if they have symptomatic students, they make sure that they have a place that the students can be for 10 to 14 days, and then following we'll be working with them on the contact tracing of those students and the case investigation. So they're just going to be managing in that way. We don't know yet what may happen with North Dakota and if they will open up a static site for the higher ed. They're still in discussions about that. We still are in conversations with the North Dakota Governor's Office about that, whether they'll open up a static site on the Fargo side and allow some testing from our higher ed on Minnesota side, as they're doing with all their higher ed in North Dakota. So we're still waiting to hear about that. There's not been a confirmation that will happen yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one question. Kathy, of these 707 confirmed cases in Clay County, we have 652 that no longer need isolation. Do we have any studies that show the number of days from the time that they were confirmed to have it till no longer needing isolation?
Well, the positive cases.
So that would be the confirmed case? That would be the
Right.
first column.
Correct.
Okay.
The confirmed
Yep,
cases.
and then the second column, they no longer need it.
Right.
So what's the time frame from the time they've got listed in the first column till the time they got listed in the second column?
Well,
Is
the
it-
positive cases are 10 days unless they're symptomatic after those 10 days. So they're only staying out for 10 days. And then if they have no symptoms, no fever, and they're well, then they're out of isolation.
So does column number 2, that just means they met a deadline with no symptoms, or have they been tested negative?
No, many of them don't get a second test.
Ah.
Many of them are they have the 10-day period, and unless they're showing symptoms toward that end or still feeling ill, they'll extend that a bit, and the contact tracers will extend their time. Those that are positive, the typical time frame is 10 days, and that's usually what we're seeing. Those that are contacts with a positive case, they're 14 days, because there's an average of 7 to 10 days where they may develop symptoms, so they're expecting them to stay
So
out
there's
a
like
bit
that
longer.
incubation period or whatever they call it,
Correct.
that they might not show symptoms for 3 or 4 days or something?
Right, correct. Yeah, 3 to 5 days even, so they're wanting them to stay out a bit longer, so it's 10 days for positive cases, 14 days for those that have contact with those positive cases.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
is there any documentation of prior positive cases testing positive again in Clay County? Have you had any issues with that?
We have not seen any of those in our case investigations and contact tracing. We haven't seen anyone that's come up positive again.
Thank you.
So, any other questions on the data? And
I have
otherwise,
one
I'll
more.
have
We
Jamie
keep-
talk.
Thank you. We keep hearing daily that cases are increasing, but if you do an analysis of the number of tests that are given every day and divide that by the number, if you have the number of positive cases, divide that by the number of tests, the percentage of confirmed cases has actually gone down by half from what it was earlier. It's not going up.
Yeah, and
It's
we
at a
don't-
0.5% or less right now in Minnesota.
In Minnesota, right.
Yes.
And we don't have a real accurate number in Clay County because we're getting negative tests now. It's better represented from Sanford and Essentia, but we aren't always getting those negative tests from the North Dakota Public Health Lab. So it's a little bit skewed, but you're right, in Minnesota it's.
And I made a mistake, I just said 0.5%, it's 0.5 or 0.05, so it's 5%.
5%,
or less,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
of confirmed cases per test.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yep, exactly. That's good, you did that math in your head.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's great. So I'll have Jamie talk just a little bit about, of course, the mask ordinance.
Good morning. Just wanted to highlight a few of the comments from yesterday. The Commissioner of Health and the Director of Infectious Disease from Minnesota spoke with the media, and so that was kind of the masking ordinance. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details in terms of what that is because there's been a lot of coverage for that, but just wanted to share some of the comments. First of all, the Commissioner of Health really just wanted to encourage people in Minnesota to comply with wearing face coverings and continuing to do the social distancing and try to help curb the spread. A couple of the things that they really highlighted was that they are hoping that people are voluntarily complying and that their focus is on education and not enforcement. So really stressing the importance. So a few of the things that they pointed out was that they are hoping that people will do this in order to slow down the spread, and they're really expecting that it'll be at least 3 weeks, if not longer, before the data will reflect that there has been an impact, and so to be patient is what their comments are. And then also, she said that within the next few weeks is when it'll be critical that we'll see the response in terms of how it will affect the schools and the openings of the schools. So I just wanted to share those comments from the press conference yesterday with you.
Thank you. Cheryl, you got some?
Cheryl.
Well, I'm going to switch the subject just a little bit. Good morning. We're going to talk a little bit about vaccinations. I'm sure you've all heard on the news that national trends for immunizations, especially for school-age children, those trends have gone downward due to COVID, either clinics being closed or parents fearful of taking their children into the clinic due to COVID. And we just had a call last week with our Minnesota Department of Health. It's a monthly immunization call. And we are going to start offering vaccinations here at Clay County again, probably the first or second week of August. I do need to place an order for additional vaccine, and we are hoping to do maybe a couple of blitz days for school-age children, as we've received a few calls from parents. Everyone hopeful that school is going to be back in session and children are needing their immunizations. So we're going to attempt to do that, and then we will certainly post that information on our Facebook page, on our Clay County Public Health website, as well as doing some public service announcement as exactly when those dates will be and times. If people do have questions, they can certainly call our public health clinic number, and that is 218-299-7777. Thank you.
I'm sure we haven't heard anything from schools yet, whether they not gonna allow kids into schools, they don't have the immunization.
I believe the governor is possibly going to make an announcement this week
Thursday.
about schools, Thursday. Everyone is planning as if schools will be open in some shape or form, whether that will be all in class or it could be a hybrid of some in-class sessions and some distance learning. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay. Very good. Jamie?
Your question about immunizations in school, this is typical that we do immunizations before school and then also for Head Start. So it is a requirement that they have immunizations when they go into school and also for Head Start. So this is pretty typical for us. We just have been holding off on some of those. So we will be opening up and having appointments for people to come in and get those kids immunized.
Yeah, I was just wondering because of some closures of clinics. Of course, I don't know if they're closed or not, but whether they're gonna let up on that requirement, but I wouldn't think so. Okay, any other further questions?
In terms of the blitz days, are you talking going into the clinic? In our CARES committee, we talked about like a tent, you know, and doing it outside to kind of help with spread in the building. Is that on your radar?
Well, we're still in the logistics of that.
Right.
Trying to figure that out. Possibly maybe just reserving a couple of our meeting rooms down on the first floor of the Family Service Center so that people don't have to come all the way into the clinic, and then we would have at least myself and another nurse there to provide those immunizations. So we're still working all those details out.
Just to follow up to that, so on the first floor there is folks would come in, are we able to, just from a traffic pattern, be able to maintain the social distancing
Yes.
for traffic purposes?
Right, and even if we're doing, like the blitz days, we would still have people scheduled appointment time, so it wouldn't be just a walk-in thing, because then we start to get people in larger numbers congregating to get in. So by appointment only, then we can space those times out.
Okay.
Any further questions on that?
Thank you.
Okay. that's-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update. Okay, with that, we're gonna go into the category framework for investing Federal CARES Act in Clay County. Steve, gonna take care of that. Pictures from all.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. As you are all well aware, this board established a coronavirus relief fund committee several weeks ago. And this committee was set up to kind of establish the framework for the allocations of the $7.8 million that Clay County received as a part of the Federal CARES Act bill that was signed back in March. We've met several times over the last few weeks, and I think one of the things that we realized fairly quickly that this is a very huge undertaking. And I think the first piece of that is, number one, based on the great need that we have within our community and getting the dollars, and the importance of getting the dollars where they're most needed. Secondly, ensuring the funding meets the Treasury guidelines by the federal government and also the state, as we know that we're going to be audited as a part of this spending process. And again, the challenge of the time frame of which we need to spend the money, which for our cities and townships would be November 15th, and for the county it's December 1st. And so this morning, the committee wanted to bring forward these 6 categories and the framework for funding that we're looking at to get the board's feedback. Today, again, it's a framework, and we do have some input, but we'll have additional detail as we move forward, but wanted to make sure that this board as a whole felt that we were moving down the right track. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of touch base on each of the 6 categories. Our Commissioner Campbell, Commissioner Mojo may have comments, additional comments on each area, but I'm just going to touch on each area. The first priority that we have is small business. We know that small businesses were one of the hardest hit here in our community, and it's important to make sure that we reach out to them to provide some small business relief during this process. Early on, we've looked to all the cities in Clay County. Our goal is to try to simplify the process, if at all possible, to make it easier for our citizens and to lead to less confusion. And so last week we met with representatives from all of the cities, or many of the cities in Clay County, and talked about that collaboration potential. And overall, there's many positive comments. Again, we have a great deal of work to do on additional detail, but a good positive step. We're also collaborating closely with the city of Moorhead and working together as far as they've done some of the work on the economic development piece of it, on the application process, and the county would be looking at providing help with the funding piece of that, of the distributions. And so it's my understanding last night that the city of Moorhead did allocate $2 million towards their small business relief program. They did break it down into categories of nonprofits and businesses owned by women and people of color. I'm not sure exactly what those breakdowns were, but I do know that they had into those 3 different categories. And they are going to have a 1-week comment period for the public to give feedback on that issue, and they'll be bringing that back to the city council on August 10th. So that is what we know now. I don't know, commissioners, if you have anything.
Well, we did have some really good dialogue with all of our cities in the county were invited to participate, and I think the vast majority of them did show up, with a couple of exceptions. And obviously they all feel the need for the business portion of this. And I think Commissioner Mojo and I think we're of the feeling that, once we come up with the parameters of who would qualify, whatever that dollar amount might be once we get a better understanding how many businesses we're dealing with, that every small business in Clay County be treated the same way. So that's kind of our goal right now from that standpoint. When it comes to by the way, this kind of looks like a Christmas tree with these Christmas bulbs. It's the first thing I saw there. But anyway, so our little Christmas tree here, the first bulb is, I think and we've got some good assistance, and I think there's going to be some cooperation. We've got some people maybe with the city who are more familiar with the original guidelines that were set forward by deed, I think it was, right? So we're going to take advantage of that, and then obviously the funding mechanism will go through our treasurer's office. So.
Well, it is a giving tree, so.
I didn't mean it that way. I just.
My question on that: do the schools fit into this anywhere, or is that a different type of system?
Yes.
Schools are going to get funding.
So the schools actually is in our second piece of community resiliency. We've again are identifying these subcategories, but community resiliency was one of the areas that we looked at potentially having working with our schools and education. In addition to housing assistance, food, financial, child care assistance were some topics that we discussed. And again, then partnering with organizations within our county that's their focal point. And so working with them to make sure that the funds get to where they need to be.
So Commissioner Campbell said that some of the cities were represented. Were any schools represented?
Well, so that meeting was strictly related to small business.
Okay,
We're going,
all right.
each of these other bulbs that are here, we're going to have additional meetings where they would partake in whatever one they fall under.
The reason I asked that is because I got a call from some schools.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I might be able to clarify.
Yeah.
This is such a huge undertaking. In order for us to kind of prioritize needs areas, we know that the school districts, all of them in the county, have been allocated an amount of money. I
Yes.
realize there's a large spectrum in that, but the schools really are, in terms of where they're at, is evaluating what their need is for fall. Until they know what the governor says on Thursday, that's still kind of something they're evaluating. What we know is that because of the executive order, their businesses were restricted from operating. So our thought process in the broad scheme of it is if we can kind of say these are the areas we want to address, let's talk about the small business portion of that first, so we can at least get the application process started. And I'm going to echo exactly what Commissioner Campbell said. Our hope and intention is that every single small business in Clay County is treated in the exact same manner. And so by doing this, it's our hope that we can at least get the ball rolling on this part. And then as we have key discussions with school districts and school board members, we can maybe evaluate the community resiliency piece. We know we have public health costs that will continue, the county infrastructure. I mean, as we go through all of these, we'll have to address different things. But our discussion with the small cities and Moorhead was important, because what we were saying to them is we know that Holly was allotted a certain amount of money that is significantly less than Moorhead and so forth. And we wanted to be able to cover small businesses in those cities so that cities had the flexibility to use their money to go towards their COVID-related expenses or how they specifically saw it in their city. Does that clarify it a little bit?
Well, yeah.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think our goal, I think the first goal was to establish these different groups of needs, and that's what this is. And we kind of are in a way we're then prioritizing within each one of them. We have a bullet list already that Steve didn't go into here that fall, like you mentioned. Where does schools fit in? Well, they fit into the community resiliency, and there's several. But some of the other things that, before we come back with a recommendation on how many dollars of the 7.8 go into each of these bulbs, we need to find out some important answers to questions that we have. For example, for the county infrastructure needs that are directly related to COVID. So if we end up having to keep people working from home and so on and so forth, do they have the right technology to do that on a continuing basis rather than the short-term deal? So we need to figure out our internal needs, and then we need to figure out what costs have there been that the county has had that we need to recuperate from as a result of COVID. And then you see the public health side there. Some of the questions that we've had about tests going forward, and are we going to test kids in school, and are we going to test college kids, and all those things, and the contract tracing and all those things. We need to, so we're working with Kathy and the public health staff to come back to us and tell us what they think those dollar amounts might be. So we've got a wide variety of things that fall into each category.
So I think there's going to be a process where they apply for this stuff, all right? Or we don't just automatically give out so much.
So our hope is that in working with the city of Moorhead, and what a lot of these businesses have already filled out grant applications because of the deed. small grants that went out, and so we're in the process of basically replicating the amount of questions and what the documents that they needed to provide in that, in terms of how do you know, what directly related to COVID was that. And so they'll do that hopefully in the next 2 weeks. I think that's hopeful, but if we can get that online, and it will be an online application process, then we will be able to have individuals that we're working on identifying, go through to make sure all the needed information is attached. And as Commissioner Campbell said, the money would come from our internal auditor treasurer office. But because of the elections, I think they're quite busy as it is. So we're just trying to streamline it to be able to get the dollars in the small businesses' hands as soon as possible.
Mr. Chair, on your question regarding will there be an application process, certainly in some of these bulbs there will be, and others there won't be. You know, so for example, when we come before you and make recommendations on what we're going to need for county infrastructure and what we're going to need for public health, there wouldn't be an application process. That's internally money that we need to spend. But anything that's outside, like you said, like Commissioner Mojo said, on the business one, anything there will require application.
Now, I know you've got this committee, you got a bunch of people on that. Who is coordinating all this? Is it the auditor's office or the treasurer's office? Is it going through them, or who's the department you go to?
Well, as of right now, the committee is working on identifying the process tree. And then we've talked about working with Derek LaPointe from the city of Moorhead as they're kind of evaluating that. And so it will be probably a tag team between the small cities and staff from the small cities. And then, and county. I mean, Steve and others are working really hard on getting this launched.
Mr. Chair, just to piggyback on that, so I think Steve is the overall person who's keeping us coordinated in the meetings and the topics and the agendas that we have. When it comes to there's processes that are going to be involved when there's the application start, and what we're looking for is some experienced folks. It's not going to be Commissioner Mojo and I doing that kind of thing. It's going to be like the Derek LaPointes. It's going to maybe be somebody from the city. We've had Karen Lauer from Barnesville is going to be involved. I think somebody from Dilworth and Glendon have volunteered to serve on that selection committee. And it basically isn't a selection committee. It's just going through to make sure they qualify. And if they meet all the qualifications, then their name will go in for the grant.
I guess that's what I was wondering. I mean, who puts the file, say, yes, you get it, you don't get it? Is that committee? Or is that department?
It will not be the committee. It will be if they have the required information and can show that there is a need, and if it's a complete grant application, it's not subjective, it will be awarded.
Will be awarded by the auditor or the treasurer? Or?
Well, once they qualify, and again, not to get too far in the weeds here, but right now we're looking at two different options. One is a dollar amount to go to businesses that have 2 employees or greater to a maximum amount of employees. You know, so I think we haven't for sure set that number yet, but for example, we might be looking from businesses with 2 to 20 employees. And then, so there'd be $1 amount for that group that if you qualify, you get that dollar amount. And then there's also going to be another one we're looking at another one for sole proprietors who just are in business by themselves but have been affected. They have a business location. This isn't for somebody working out of their home. That's one of the criteria that the state has kind of put out. And then we're looking at something that's really important to us, that is the daycares. That falls under the business one as well. So,
Steve, I think it would be helpful. part of the issue is that we've met, what, 4 or 5 times already, and an enormous amount of information is covered in that. I think as we're going through this, it would be important to have the frequently asked questions, the parameters from the state that we are just going to follow for the rest of the commissioners to have. You know, and I think that it's hard to explain. I mean, we're trying to explain it in our committee reports, but it will spell it out better for the rest of the commissioners if they have that.
Well, I'm probably trying to getting into this too much, you know, but I'm just thinking, what if you run out of money? How do you know when you run out of money? But if this one runs out of money,
Right.
what about the second one? Can you take some money from the second one?
Well, here's
and go to the-
where we're at. The city of Moorhead allocated $2 million, and I believe from our discussions, that would be up to $10,000 for small businesses. There's different breaks in that. Our hope is that we would follow that same break in terms of employees. Our discussion with the small cities was to say, okay, how many do you think you have in your jurisdiction that would apply, that would go to this? And so we've kind of talked about a number, earmarking, and you know, I think we started at maybe 1.5 million if we were to set aside 1.5 million for those applications, but it's become clear that there could be additional, so maybe that number is anywhere from 2 million to 2.5 million that we allocate for small businesses, up to $10,000. But our hope is that we're addressing the needs of all the small businesses in the county. And so part of why we're being cautious in terms of recommendations for these later is that there may be some that come forward. If they've already received small business grants, they're not going to qualify for this. And you have to be in good standing. We've got to work on some of the parameters going forward. But the reality is that the money needs to be allocated by December 1st, and that's a quick turnaround, and the application process will happen, and we'll have a pretty good idea based on what applications we get in, if we're high or under the money.
Mr. Chair, one of the pieces of homework that Steve asked all of these representatives from these different communities to do when they came to our meeting was to do kind of an inventory of their small businesses within their communities. To go to your exact question, well, what if you put so much money on this and then you don't have enough to meet what we want to do? Our goal is to have enough preliminary data so that we're quite comfortable that the amount we set aside in bulb 1 will cover bulb 1.
I'm not trying to question the committee at all.
No, we know
I'm
that.
trying to get information out
No,
to the public.
I think it's important. So I think this is another thing we talked about. So businesses that have received funds from the Small Business Emergency Loan SBEL program are not eligible for the program. But if the business received funds from other Small Business Administration emergency loan programs, Paycheck Protection Program loan, or Economic Injury Disaster loan, or any other federal SBA loan, those businesses are still eligible. And so that's pretty helpful in determining if they're eligible or not.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that update, yes.
And I think 2 things, Mr. Chair. The goal will be is along with the data that we hope to have going into it, we'll have a deadline. And so once they meet that deadline, we'll have a number of businesses will know what the allocations potentially are at that time, or would know then at that time. And again, there may be people that might apply after the fact, and we'll deal with that based on the funding that we have. And so I think that's important. I think the other piece is we wanted to bring this 6 categories to you and give the brief explanation. As Commissioner Mojo said, we've met about 5 times. And so to have a solid, you're asking excellent questions, and those are the things that we're going to be working over the next weeks to provide some more solid answers for the commissioners.
Just to give you an idea, the amount of work that we're doing, we were originally scheduling 1 meeting a week to do this, and we're actually going to try to reserve a second day of each week just to get through this first phase. There's that much to do on this.
Oh, I'm sure there's. Very good.
And just to touch base, Commissioner Campbell has touched on a lot of the other categories. I did want to touch on the one we didn't address, and that's small communities. As I mentioned at the beginning, Clay County received just over $7.8 million. Small communities that have cities and townships that have less than 200 citizens in their area did not receive or weren't eligible for direct allocations from the state. And so Clay County received an additional $86,161. That's a part of that $7.8 million that is set aside for these cities and townships if they have COVID costs related to the pandemic. And so I made an attempt to reach out to, again, we've talked with every city. I've also spoke with just about every township. And so we made those people aware and provided them information to apply for the CARES Act dollars if they didn't have that. So,
And it may be, Steve, if you can, for the rest of the board too. So we talked about the 7.8 million that Clay County got. That includes that 86,000.
That's correct.
For small towns, but each city above 200 also got their own allocation. And the process is they have a certain time period to use that, and if it doesn't, what happens to those dollars?
those dollars end up they have to be turned over to the county for a period from the 15th or 16th of November through December 1st, which then the county would have access to those dollars. And then on the 1st of December, the county has to turn the dollars back to the state. And the state will then have roughly 30 days to utilize those, and they'll have to return it to the federal government at the end of the year.
Do any of these dollars have to be paid back? Say we give dollars out, do any of these dollars have to be paid back?
Well, in relation to the small business piece, we're looking to phase that in as a grant, and so the answer would be no. When you look at the whole of the $7.8 million, we'll have to go through a single audit next year. And as long as what we spend our money on meets the criteria of the Federal CARES Act, there won't be a repayment process.
Okay, thank you.
So the intention right now for the assistance to small businesses, it will be a grant. No need to pay that.
Yeah. Do you have a question, Jim?
No.
Okay, anything further than that?
Now, that's it.
Well, I just may end by saying that we are trying very hard to identify all of the areas in which citizens have been negatively affected because of COVID. And part of the other bullets here is to work through how we can best help in terms of going forward with that. And so if you have people reach out to you, as you said, or you've identified areas. For instance, if school is virtual again, there are pockets of Clay County that have very limited internet access. And so how do kids fairly access internet if our broadband needs are great? So that's part of what we're evaluating, if it's even available for us to help connect into some sort of infrastructure there. But if you see needs or hear of needs, make sure you let us know so we can continue to advocate for those areas.
Okay, thank you. Jim, I know you have to leave early. You've got a family situation there. Do you want to give your report now, or do you?
I was so tied up the past week with the events of my father passing away that I didn't have any report to give you. Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Chair, I would like to go back just for a second. We were kind of hoping for an approval of this board on what we have here based on these 6 different categories. We'd like to see the board give our committee the go-ahead to use that as our guidelines.
I would like to
that
make a motion
Go ahead.
to approve a
Sec-
plan to identify the 6 category framework for investing Federal CARES Act
And I'll
into Clay County.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion by Jim, second by Grant to approve that CARES Act information. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you're doing on that. That's going to be talking about a lot of money to be distributed. Okay, with that, we're going to the West Central Initiative on Economic Development in Clay County. I think we've got Rebecca Peterson and Jill Amundsen here, if I got the right ones.
Yes.
Or did
you're
you
right.
switch out on us?
No, you've got the right names. Good to see you all. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and staff, and thank you especially for making the video possible. We put together a short video so that we could bring more of the West Central Initiative staff into the room with us. We do lots of things besides planning and philanthropy, and this video gives you an opportunity to see all of the programs that we have available. We happen to focus on the city of Battle Lake because everything we do is happening there. So there may be things that you see in this video that you would like us to implement in some of the communities in Clay County. So with that, we'll let the video tell the story.
Perfect example of the broad spectrum of work that we do in West Central Minnesota. And each of the examples is a picture into what is possible in your community.
The West Central Initiative offers a variety of different planning services. One of the things that we do is safe routes to school plans. And the safe routes plans involve what we call the 5 E's. That's engineering, encouragement, enforcement, evaluation, and education. The planning assistance dollars are available basically every fall to communities that are interested in doing a plan. That program is still available to other communities that are interested in applying for planning dollars.
One of the really unique things about the West Central Initiative, we have several grant-making tools that are designed to help communities. The Child Care Capacity Grant is just one of those grant-making tools, specifically designed to provide support to communities who are struggling with child care needs and really have a plan for starting a child care center in their community.
Through our planning grant program, we recently worked with the City of Battle Lake for them to hire University of Minnesota Extension to conduct a business retention and expansion program within the city that helped them understand the business needs better in the community. A question that's often asked is, what is gap financing? In our case, gap financing is when a bank is not able to lend the total amount needed for a project, and once you factor in the owner's equity share, there's still amount needed for the project to get done. And that's where West Central Initiative steps in with our GAP program. Another one of West Central Initiative's loan programs is the Small Enterprise Loan Fund, which are often referred to as microloans. They are smaller loans that do not require a lead bank to provide financing, and we can provide loans for retail sales, service establishments, operating capital, and equipment purchases. West Central Initiative also works with its communities by providing direct technical assistance. We worked with the City of Battle Lake while they were trying to reestablish their Economic Development Authority and attended meetings and helped provide outside planning perspective while they undertook that process to reestablish their EDA.
West Central Initiative's Live Wide Open program embraces all that we love about the 9 counties of West Central Minnesota. It features stories and resources for people looking to move here, stories of people who have moved here. West Central Initiative, along with several partners in the region, hope that Live Wide Open can stimulate discussions to find out more about living in West Central Minnesota.
West Central Initiative hosts many community funds, including Battle Lake. A lot of the work that we do with our community funds varies from community to community. So I think one of the roles we play is in that encouragement piece and the connectivity piece.
What would the community be like without West Central Initiative? And I'd have to say it'd be very different. West Central Initiative people are always available. Whatever project we're thinking about, working on, we just give them a call and somebody comes over and helps us out.
Donor advised funds are the coolest thing. You can set up a family foundation with West Central Initiative. We call this a donor advised fund, but oftentimes it's like a family foundation.
The donor advised fund is just a way for us to give away a lot of money right now and make sure that it's just directed to those causes
West Central Initiative was supportive. So the flexibility is just, I just can't say enough about it.
The Ruri Pond was established by the DNR 60 years ago to raise walleyes. It didn't hold water, so they closed it up, and for many years it's been sitting empty. Trees have been growing up in the middle of it, yet the berms have been maintained by the local users to use as walking trails.
And at West Central Initiative, we love this project. It's one of those examples where a group of people, a community, came together over a project that they were passionate about.
They wanted to make sure that, in fact, it stayed open to the public and in a conservation status forever.
We hope that you'll be inspired to think about how your community can come together to shape the future that they want.
Well, thank you for indulging us. When we showed this video to the Network Battle Lake folks, we asked if anybody learned anything new about West Central Initiative, and everyone in the room raised their hand. So I think people know us for maybe one component of what we do, but not all of the programs that we offer. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Good morning. So I've brought you data, as I normally do in this format, but it's all 2019 data, which is way less interesting than what's happening in our universe right now. One piece I wanted to draw specifically to your attention is in the bottom corner, there's a graph that shows unemployment, and you'll see what our April unemployment looked like versus the crisis of 2009-2010. As you'll see, our Economic Development Region 4 is faring better by the gap, better than the rest of the United States. So we're happy to see that. While we're in crisis, we see the strength in our communities and know that we will be able to rebound. As you discuss your CARES Act dollars, please let us be a resource to you. We are expecting a grant from the Economic Development Authority, a federal grant to allow West Central Initiative to assist communities in that planning. So that there's a way for us to be helpful, we'd love to do that. You'll see a survey released from us shortly that's asking specific questions, directing our work over the next 5 years.
So we like to use the expression, and we appreciate the hard work that you're doing on this CARES Act distribution, that we're kind of building the bicycle as we learn to ride it. This has been a year like no other. So last year we introduced our new strategic framework at the commission meeting, and we find that this is even more pertinent than ever now with COVID-19. So we continue to reimagine regional, invest in local, educate, activate, and celebrate. When we were gearing up for our grant program, as you remember last year, we did some grant making in your region through our community funds and other grant programs. And we needed to do something in response to COVID. So we created something we called the Resiliency Fund. And within a month, actually 6 weeks, we were able to identify about $1.2 million, of which the first, I think it was $300,000 that we rolled out for child care centers. In Clay County, we invested in 43 different child care centers. One of them was center-based, the other 42 were home-based. We invested $45,000 in child care emergency grants. We also identified hand sanitizer and bleach, so we were able to provide all of the child care centers in our 9-county region and wider with supplies that they were short on. And so we went into what we call resiliency mode. We also made grants, over $500,000 in grants throughout the 9-county region. $53,000 we reinvested in Clay County. We made 7 grants in Clay County, up to $10,000. Some of them were for $5,000, some were for $10,000, to the Immigrant Development Center, to Churches United for Homeless, to the Lakes and Prairie Community Action, Yule and Hitterdal Public Schools, the Village Family Service, South Sudanese Foundation, and the Clay County Collaborative. We took a pause after May, after distributing these dollars, because we knew that there would be even greater need come fall, see the schools reopening. So the survey that Jill is putting together will be of great value to us as we regroup and continue to repopulate that resiliency fund and spread it back out throughout the region. So that's what we've been up to. The other piece that we handed out to you is our annual report. Basically, it's telling the story of Reimagine Regional, Invest in Local, Educate, Activate, and Celebrate. We know that we're writing a new story every day right now, so it's good for us to hear what great work you're doing in response to COVID. Do you have any questions for us? I bet you do.
Well, you say the great work we're doing, but I was on the board for 6 years, and I think it's the great work that you are doing. And I think while I was on the board, I was always felt that people aren't taking advantage of all the programs that are available to them, you know, and I think we got to get this word out to the businesses and stuff like that, all the stuff that you guys make available to the people, you know. And I'm glad that you read off quite a few people that are utilizing it in Clay County, and I'm glad to see that, but I think there's a lot more opportunity out there yet for businesses to get involved with, like Battle Lake is a good example of that, you know. That's available to all communities.
We totally agree, and I think with the impetus of hopefully hiring 2 more planning staff, we'll be able to do more of that.
I was just gonna say that the grant from the Economic Development Administration is, we wrote specifically to staff up and make sure that we had people available to do that work in the communities, because we know how important it is. It's going to be on the ground doing the work right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to go out there, contact those cities, because sometimes the cities or the counties, whatever, you get involved in your own routine, you don't know there's someone out there that, hey, they're there to help you, and some of them are not aware of that yet, I don't think.
And I think our marketing efforts are becoming more robust. You know, when I came on staff a couple of years ago, somehow I felt we were one of the best kept secrets, and we're really getting out there and trying to promote more. We appreciate all the partnerships we have, and so your help in promoting our work is really essential as well. As we go into this next round of grant making, we want to make it more of a participatory grant making process where we connect with people on the ground and what are their needs, and they can help us. I also would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to thank you for your past support, and I think I sent a letter of that to Stephen. You know, last year we suggested climbing up a little bit because we hadn't asked cities and counties to increase their support, and we had asked you to increase to 9,000 last year and possibly 10 this year. We know that these are unusual times, so we want you to do what's comfortable and meaningful for you, so. Thank you.
Well, it's good for you to get the word out, because a lot of times people just don't come to meetings. They don't come to city council meetings and Clay County meetings, and so it's tougher to get the word out sometimes. So, very good. Any questions for the people?
No question, just a comment. As you mentioned, we had gone from 8,000 to 9,000, and you're carefully asking us to consider 10,000. In terms of how you've positively affected change and citizens of Clay County with that investment, I think it's what you've done is far greater than the dollars contributed. So thank you very much for stretching the dollar farther to help as many people as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, Rebecca and Jill, for coming forward with that, and thank
now
you for your...
Now I have to put on my nose warmer.
Okay, there you go. That's another thing we can use in the wintertime, you know.
Yes. All right, thank you.
We can keep these for the winter. Okay, with that, do we have this, let's see, who's gonna get him on the line, or is it? We're talking about a request to buy back some property in Comstock, and there's Nancy.
Hello. Rick? Yeah. All right, here, just one moment. I'll put you on the line, and just wait for the commissioners to ask for your input.
Okay, at this time we got Rick Erickson from the Comstock area. Evidently, we're going to be talking about 2 tax forfeited properties.
Correct.
Nancy, you going to give us a lowdown on that before we get to Rick?
These 2 properties, as I put in my notes, had confession of judgments on repayment agreements. You can allow up to 2. He had 2 of them on him, and he defaulted on both of those. And so now, after we've done our due process, the property is forfeited to the state of Minnesota. And Mr. Erickson does have the right to ask it be for him to repurchase it if the board approves.
Okay, Mr. Erickson, you have any comments?
Excuse me?
Have you got any comments to make or concerning these properties?
No, that's just my residence.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Erickson did provide a letter that's in your packet explaining his input on how he got to the situation that he's in.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to add that the amount owed on here was a April amount, and so there are August amounts that will be due that are more than what are in this letter.
Okay. I see.
Nancy, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The $3,680.96, is that the August amount?
No, I have $3,196.58 is the August amount, and then if you want him to pay his first half of the current year, that would be an additional $491.70. I would ask that if you guys do approve this, that you give him a timeline as to when it should be paid by, and that it be in cashier's checks.
Okay, we do approve this, Mr. Erickson. Are you prepared to pay for that amount since you haven't in the past?
I would, if it's possible, I would like to have a little bit of time. I haven't. I was in the hospital pretty much the whole month of June.
Okay, what are you talking about a little bit of time?
90 days.
Be fine with me.
Okay. So what would happen when, after 90 days, if there's no payment received yet?
Then it's still in the state of Minnesota's name, and these properties would be auctioned off in December at our regular auction.
Okay. I mean, there wouldn't be another option to appeal, I mean, if it doesn't.
Yes, up until the tax forfeit sale.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, in the landowner's, or the applicant's letter, he did address the issue of being in the hospital in June and recovering from health issues. And if I recall, that's part of one of the parameters that we've allowed circumstances like this in the past.
Okay. My question is not so much that these property taxes didn't just come in June while he was in the hospital.
No, one of them it goes back to 2016, and one of them goes back to 2010.
Okay.
Because with those confession of judgments.
How much is the 2010 amount?
I don't know how much the 2010 amount is. It would be, now it would be his current amount on the property at, I believe it's the 0030 property is the one that's back to 2010. Because one was a homestead, one was a non-homestead, and that used to make a difference. It's changed since then. The homestead for 5 years and non-homestead was 3 years.
Okay, Mr. Erickson, you feel that if we give you 90 days, if the board approves or something like that, you would be able to pay all of these back taxes?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve his request with a deadline to bring everything current by the end of October of 2020. October 31st, 2020.
Okay, we've got a motion by Grant to have give Mr. Erickson up to October 31st, 2020.
I would second the motion. I would maybe suggest the 30th, that's a Friday.
Okay, we'll make it the 30th then.
Cashier's check or cash.
Yep.
Right. Correct.
All right. Do you understand that motion, Mr. Erickson?
Yes, I do.
Okay, any further discussion? Call for the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Mr. Erickson, you have till October the 30th to get the cashier's check or cash into Nancy October 30th.
Okay, thank you much.
Okay, Mr. Erickson.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Okay, we're going with the first budget update. Matt, with planning and zoning. How much are you going to save us this year?
Well,
I mean, that is what you're coming forward with, right?
that's right.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Morning, Matt.
Here to present my proposed budget for 2021. Just for your own information, I did take out the expenditures for the proposed budget and made them a little bigger and put them on the second page of this handout. So overall, not considering any new requests, looking at about a 5% increase to the budget this year. Some notable changes would be to equipment repair and maintenance, just because we did get a new vehicle last year, and that new vehicle has been very, very essential and invaluable in getting out and around the county, meeting with folks, performing inspections, things of that nature. The other change would be, there are a couple other changes that I want to highlight actually. There's a $2,500 in other professional services. This would be for, right now, information services in my department is working with North Point Consulting, GIS firm, to develop a online building permit application. A lot of folks who have applied for building permits in the county, one of the most common questions I get is, can I do this online? Can I pay with a credit card? This application will allow them to do just that. It'll make inspections a lot easier. I think it'll streamline the entire process of applying for a building permit.
Mr. Chair, and maybe Steve's, part of this discussion stemmed around COVID and us being closed to the public, and how do we better effectively change the access for citizens to information. Is this something that we could qualify for the COVID funding?
Yeah, I think this is certainly something that we could look at within our community and evaluate that.
I mean, as we move forward, that's been part of the discussion, is how do we make sure that citizens are able to get their building permits and do it online if we don't have office hours. So I think we should definitely keep that on top of the COVID conversation.
Is that the new request? You're talking about the 20,000 or is it the 2,500?
2,500.
What's the 20,000 new request?
Yeah, so the 20,000 is one of, when I was first hired a little over a year ago, one of the things that was asked of the new planning director, or directives, yes, thank you, that's a better word, was to pursue looking at updating our Clay County Comprehensive Plan, which was last updated in 2002. And so this is kind of, the timing is a little awkward here, just because this is just kind of started developing in the past couple of months. But we do have an opportunity to work with MetroCog on developing that comprehensive plan. And that was introduced to the Highway Tracking Committee as well as the Planning Commission. And to me, this represents kind of a very unique opportunity in that looking at the cost of comprehensive plans, talking with consulting firms, and then also just comparing with my experience on working on comprehensive watershed management plans. For an entire plan to be complete, you'd be normally looking at $200,000 to $250,000. And so working with MetroCog right now on kind of a scope of work and a preliminary budget, and we're thinking that cost could be, if MetroCog were to do it, based on the federal funding that they receive, would be more like in the $80,000 to $90,000 range, with the county contributing a local match for things that would not be eligible for federal funding. So I don't know if this is probably something that should be a separate agenda item, approving going through a comprehensive plan, but I just wanted to include that as a placeholder, just in planning my budget for 2021, and knowing that this is something that could potentially start as early as January 2021, if we do indeed go forward with it.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Commissioner Mojo on the $2,500. I think that is something that certainly would qualify under the what we're talking about in the CARES, and so I think that would fall under that bullet again of county infrastructure type of thing that we talked about. So we might be able to remove that from your budget and just take that out of CARES. So, but I agree on the comprehensive plan that 20,000 is pretty cheap in comparison when we can coordinate with MetroCog, and I know I've suggested that Frank, you and Jenny would both be part of that comprehensive plan. But that, like you said, that should be a separate agenda. But I think it's good that you're putting that in there.
Thanks. So another item that's come up a lot in our county-owned lands committee is the need for ongoing maintenance work on our county-owned properties. There are things such as weed control. There's been issues with people dumping garbage and other things onto our county properties that would need to be cleaned up. There's been some, I guess, partying that's happened on county properties. So things like putting up a gate and making walk-in access only on some of the properties. There's just a need for maintenance. So under a miscellaneous request, I did put $5,000 just to do that annual maintenance for some of these county-owned properties. I mean, we already have identified some properties that could be used immediately today, and I think that it would, I guess I believe it's in the county's best interest to maintain these properties and take good care of them.
And I may follow up on that. I think in the past, it's some of these lands that were purchased with bonding dollars that we can't get rid of. It's become, I don't want to say a nuisance to the county, but it definitely is. Either it's Dave Overbo trying to coordinate folks to get out there and mow it, or it's the sheriff's office, or there are costs that are incurred with having these. We don't want to close them to the public because obviously the public owns them, but I think that's fair. I know we've talked about, we've sold some land, we've talked about maybe selling some land in the future, and I think some of those sales should probably go to replenish what that account may be. I don't want to say the entirety or 1% or whatever it is, but it has to be a nominal amount so that when we do have an issue, it's not Dave saying, well, I guess I don't have that in my budget, or who's going to spray it, or whatever. So I think that's fair.
My comment to that would be, I guess I would prefer that to say, rather than miscellaneous, I would like it to say maintenance of county-owned property.
Sure.
You know, miscellaneous could end up being anywhere and anything down the road, and I think if the intent is for that purpose, we should list that purpose.
Sure.
Any other questions? When I go over budget, I normally see, you're looking for the big item increases, And why is para doubling? What is involved there? Is that new employees or what? or more employees going on the rolls, or?
Well, the reason it went from 6,800 to 10,259, maybe I'm wrong, but we did add a technician, a planning tech, and so Emma Norderman, who's now gone, but that was the first year that she would have been on that.
Yes, that's my understanding.
But this year it's doubling again, 2021.
Yeah, I would have to check with Lori. I'm not sure why it reverted, appears it reverted back to one
I mean,
employee.
I hate to pick on that one subject, I mean, just
Yeah.
like I say,
Yeah.
normally you pick out the big items.
I think that looks like a mistake, because in 2019, it was 10,659. And right now, year to date, you're already at 6,408.
So that's something I'll have to check with Lori.
Because if you double that, you're much closer to that 13,323.
Okay.
Because that's only June year to date, correct?
Yes.
Well, I think if you take out that 2,500, your 5% becomes significantly less. So,
Yeah.
more in line, I think, with what we would like to see.
Okay.
But
One other thing I just want to point out, because I know that some of you have had questions about this, is looking at how this COVID-19 pandemic has, if it's impacted our building permits or permit activity or revenues at all. And if you look on the first page of the handout here, that gray bar is basically showing 2020, and you know, we were a little flat between April and May, but other than that, it looks like it's been a busy year thus far for us in terms of building permits. So it looks like we're kind of hitting our 2018 high just maybe a month or two later. And then conditional interim use permit, they're a little trickier to track because they kind of fluctuate from year to year. But I haven't seen any significant changes in those applications as well.
Okay, any further questions for Matt?
Matt, this isn't related to your budget, but before COVID, we were in the process of identifying ordinances that were needed to be updated. Can you at least tell the commission where we stand on those conversations? I know we've kind of halted the meeting.
Yeah, we kind of had to put that on pause with the current situation that we're in. The subcommittee was most of the way through our 8 chapters of the Land Development Code. We're still need to go through the chapter on subdivisions. One thought in light of the prospect of doing a comprehensive plan in 2021 is, my thought on that is we would maybe put our ordinance update on pause and wait and see what happens, what comes out of the comprehensive plan process update if we decide to go that route. Just because it's typically how it's done is your comprehensive plan is your overall framework, vision for land use and development in the county, and then your ordinance is your tool to implement that comprehensive plan. So if we continued with the ordinance update, I feel like after we did the plan, we would just have to come back and update the ordinance again.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Thank you so much, and I do want to mention that the past couple of weeks I've been working with residents and some complaints, and I want to thank you for your work and helping me out with that and stuff. Thank you very much for your input.
Absolutely. So, and I've been out there too, so.
Well, you've been out there since then? Very good.
Yes, yep. So.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're gonna go into, Tony and Gabe is here too with the information of corrective action notice and notice of non-compliance letters for the Minnesota buffer law.
I have another handout for you.
Thank you. Looks like there's more problems in the northern part of the county there.
Yeah, it appears to be that way.
Is that mostly because of the Wild Rice Watershed Board doing it different than the Buffalo, or?
Yeah, so I guess there are some still non-compliant parcels down in the Buffalo Red Watershed District. But they're going through that easement process, so that's just taking a little bit longer for them to do that. And the county has taken over the enforcement for the wild rice ditches, and so that's why it seems like there's more up there, I guess, than, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay, well, go ahead with your letter, I guess, with,
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of gotten to the point where we're a couple years past the deadline for the buffer law. And we've worked with all these landowners. I've had phone conversations with all these landowners, and our board had made the decision last year that if by July 1st the buffers aren't established, then we'd move forward with sending the notification of noncompliance to the county, and then the county would send the corrective action notice to the landowner. And basically what that does is starts the clock, I guess. So the landowner would still have 11 months to get into compliance before anything is done. But it just kind of starts that clock and starts the enforcement process. And the majority of the counties throughout the state have already started that process. So, and the state is kind of putting pressure to get that process started for the buffer law. So.
So, Mr. Chairman and Gabe, my understanding is that we're talking about 14 parcels, 5 landowners. There's about a 99% compliance rate in Clay County.
Correct, yep.
I would just add too, I think it's about 90% statewide. There was an article in the Star Tribune, I think last week or the week before, just addressing it. Same thing Gabe said, that it's been going on for a couple of years, and it's very, very, very high statewide.
okay. So this is just to put enforce a letter that, so who does the enforcement? You do the enforcement then, Tony, or?
Well, like Gabe started, it's 11 months, and it's 11 months basically to work with the county to get into compliance. Like Gabe said, it starts the clock, and then yes, eventually there's a possibility of an administrative penalty order. There's certain fines and other recourse out there after 11 months if the property's not brought into compliance. But it's not like it starts tomorrow and it has to be done tomorrow. The county has some obligation to work with the landowner during that 11 months.
Just because you give a person a fine doesn't correct the problem. So who corrects the problem? Since the farmer hasn't done it yet, I mean, who's gonna correct the problem?
I believe the county is responsible for enforcement action.
As part of our discussions, I think when this all was in the implementation and planning stages, that there's some dollars allotted that if needed, the county would then have to plant the buffer strips, and then assess the fines or fees would be assessed to the tax roll, correct? Of the parcel?
That's my understanding, yes. And there is funding available for that. It's actually on the budget handout that I gave you. I didn't note that.
Okay.
It's on the second page.
So Gabe would be allowed to go out there and do some planting.
I guess I don't necessarily know if the county would be planting the buffer, but the landowner would be fined until they get the buffer planted, as far as my understanding.
Yeah. I guess my situation, and what I'm thinking, you know, you can fine them and fine them if they don't do it. Does he pay the fine or doesn't he pay the fine? I mean, it's a long process
Right.
if he doesn't cooperate.
Yeah. Well, and I honestly don't think it's gonna get to that point. I think the landowners have been willing for the most part, and I think once we start this 11-month clock, I think they're gonna get done voluntarily.
Okay. So why do you feel these haven't been done yet?
Well, maybe just because, well, a lot of it is, I've been working with either the landowner or the renter, and there's been some miscommunication between the landowner and the renter, and since we've sent out letters and we've had conversations with them, but there hasn't been an official letter from the county. So I don't know if some of them don't think it's.
They want something more official, huh?
Yeah, not taking it seriously.
That's where Tony comes in. Okay.
Correct, yes.
So what do we need here? Do we need an approval to approve these letters or?
I just think this was more informational. So for each parcel, the county will receive this notice of non-compliance letter. And then once we receive this letter we receive it from the soil SWCD, then we would send out a corrective action notice to the landowner. And so that would either come from my office, the county attorney's office CC'd on that, or it would just come directly from the county attorney's office.
Okay. Any further questions for them? Pardon?
Do you have any questions at all?
No, that's just what I'm trying to find out. We understand this policy here, that what they're gonna do.
I just want to thank Gabe for reaching out. I know as this was kind of developing, he was sure to call, notify not only myself, but also the county attorney's office as well as our administrator's office. And so this is something we've been aware of internally, and that's just a part of having to implement this order. So,
Yeah. Thank you, Gabe, for keeping us up to date on that and for keeping the program going.
Yep.
So it's good to see that. I mean, we're talking very limited amount of parcels that are left in Clay County, and
Right.
good job of that.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much for the update. Okay, we're scheduled for a break right now. Does anybody want that break? Okay, we're going to take a little 5-minute recess there. All right, we'll get started again with presentation of the law enforcement budget. Got Sheriff Empteen, we got Julie Savat, and Gabe here, Gabe's here, I see. Okay. You're in the shadow there. Okay, we'll start out with Julie.
Thank you. So I'll start with our revenues for the jail. There's be some slight changes in our revenue projections for 2021. First, we'll just start from the very beginning. I don't predict any booking fee changes. Hopefully, we'll be able to maintain what we were projected for 2020, which I'm not sure we're going to make that, but I think it'll be very similar to what we did in 2018 from 2019. So we're going to continue that for 2020. No changes there. The one we were going to have a change on is our board and care prisoners. For 2020, we projected that we would have contracts in place where we would be able to house inmates for other counties as well as the state and possibly the U.S. Marshals. With COVID, that all came to a screeching halt. And with the backlog of cases and warrants and things like that, in 2021, I foresee that our population is going to be Clay County population and not contracted beds. That doesn't mean we're not going to try and still take some contracts, but I did have to reduce our budget significantly for revenue projections for 2021.
Okay, that would also save us money though too, not having to provide some of those services, or?
Well, the contracted beds would have been, really that would have been over and above revenue because we're already paying for services for our inmates and we could incorporate a higher population and then used our same services we had, so it would have been a revenue
Yeah,
for us.
I realize it would be a
Yeah.
good revenue, yes.
Yes, it would.
I think what our chair is suggesting though is that there's some expense that's tied to the population count. For
There-
example,
Sure.
meals,
Sure, meals.
you know, so I mean, there'd be a
Right,
little
yeah.
bit of savings there, but not having to pay for that.
Pretty minimal. Okay. Otherwise, the rest of the revenue projections are based on past practice, no changes. We'll move on down to my expenses. There is a reduction in our part-time salaries with our current staffing plan. That's the one that's been mandated by the State of Minnesota Department of Corrections. It's a very efficient staffing plan, and based on our usage, I felt I could reduce our costs there, and I significantly reduced our part-time salaries.
Excuse me just a minute. Which page are we on there? You know, Steve, which page
This
that is?
packet, you're on, it's headings, corrections, 1.
10 and 11. Thank you. I hate to be the only one lost.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Do you have any questions so I can keep going?
Go ahead.
Okay. Then on down to the utilities and public service, that was increased, just talking with Joe and past usage again. Let's see here. So we did have another reduction, and that would have been in prisoner care. Again, I based that on what we're actually spending for our inmates, and I was able to reduce it. Medical costs, you just never really know. You don't know what's coming in our door, but you know, I'm optimistic that with our current medical company that we have, that they're very efficient and they can take care of a lot of stuff in-house, so we're not sending people out to doctor's appointments. We can do a lot of that in-house, so I feel we can reduce that budget area. The other big item is our inmate custodial supplies. The jail now has an operating kitchen and a bigger laundry room than we've ever had in the past. So it takes more chemicals to run the various equipment we have back there. In addition, we're going to start to pay for all the custodial supplies for the jail. Before, there was a line item in George's budget, and there was some even in Joe's budget. We're going to combine it all into one budget, and I will take care of coding all the bills for all the custodial supplies for the jail. That way we can have a clean idea of what things actually cost to run that. One thing we need to remember though is since COVID has hit, we're basing it on things we're not 100% sure on. Our population is down. Once that goes up again, our costs for chemicals will increase. Well, I can't base that projection on 2019 because we didn't have the laundry room or the kitchen, so I really have no clean data to base 2021 on. But talking with Joe, we felt this was a good place to start. But keep in mind that for 2022, there may be some differences just because we're not sure what we actually will spend.
And so, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, the addition from the budgeted amount of 2020 of 16,000 to 50,000, much of that money is coming, we're reallocating it from Joe's budget and separating it into the actual, where it's being actually spent.
So it'll come out of the building and grounds budget, or
Yeah.
whatever that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Joe and George are
transfer
going to
over.
come in with a lot lower budget, right?
I'm coming
Okay.
in, I actually am coming in with a lower budget. The last thing I'd like to mention, we did have to increase our uniform costs just because our usage and with our staff, we just needed to increase it a couple $1,000s there. Otherwise, the jail does have a lower budget request from last year. Does anybody have any questions for me?
What's your population running now, Julie?
Today, we were sitting at 72. And I have 30 in quarantine. So it's a pretty high number for us. We have to shuffle people around. We have every single housing unit being occupied in the jail, even with the low numbers, just so we can properly quarantine everybody for 14 days.
You just quarantine them for,
So here's what we quarantine them for 14 days, regardless if they have a symptom or not. But then we test on day 10, and we wait for that test result to come back to determine if they can go general population or not. And knock on wood, we've had 0 cases of COVID in our jail.
very good. Good
Mr.
job.
Chair, can I ask a Julie?
Yes, go
Do you have anything, and I know Gabe's been working with you on on this COVID issue, but like PPEs and that kind of stuff, are there any plans for increased costs for that in here, or?
No.
Okay. Okay, so,
Just so you know, Kevin, that if she buys PPE stuff, it's getting coded under mine,
Okay.
as a COVID fund code. So that'll
Okay.
actually be reflected in mine. Everyone in the county, other than public health, they have their own fund code.
okay, so all of PPE issues will come under your emergency management?
Correct, even like what Joe is purchasing, Georgia, their
Okay.
increases have been falling, been quoted under mine.
Okay. And we can use some CARES for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for me?
I just want, on health insurance, since there's an increase, do you already know that our health insurance is gonna go up, or are we just predicting that it may go up?
Well, we don't know for sure, but anything with health insurance here isn't captured. It would have to do with positions that, within the agency that have adjusted from the last budget. So any increases, we don't know what that is. We should know hopefully in
August.
August, yeah.
Is that based on that figure, that $10,000 increase, is that based on new employees, or is that just based on, I think the insurance is gonna go up?
That's based on the formula that Lori Johnson gave us. I don't adjust that. That's
Okay.
based on the employees.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
I think that might be something good, Mr. Chair, to at some point have Darren come in and give us a report on the, since we changed that health insurance on January 1, he's got some data now on showing how many of those people were single versus family, and how that's saving some too with that change we made, so.
Very good. Good point.
Morning,
Go ahead,
Commissioners.
Gabe.
All right. Morning. I'll just give you kind of a brief update on 2020 and emergency management. Actually, last fall, prior to 2020, we had I talked about it last year when we met, a large-scale rail exercise with the Moorhead Hazmat team, all the volunteer fire departments in Clay County and Burlington Northern Santa Fe. We were able to deploy our drone, go over cooling as far as like a rail car, a chemical car. So anyways, that was one of the major exercises emergency management has hosted. And that was I thought a very good success. In February, I was able to attend the State Homeland Security and Emergency Management Conference in Minneapolis, and that was about the end of any sort of training or conferences for the year due to COVID. Back on March 10th, Clay County declared a disaster declaration for the spring flood. On March 17th, we declared a disaster declaration for the COVID pandemic. We had plans, and I've worked extensively with the Assistant Emergency Manager, Nicole Reno, myself, and the City of Moorhead Emergency Manager on reinvigorating our CERT program, which is a co-op that we've had in the past between Moorhead and Clay County, where we take Mark Sloan, for example, is a part of that team. It stands for Community Emergency Response Team. So certain employees, county and city employees that have an interest in learning some basic first aid skills, disaster response, damage assessments would receive some training on that. So in the event, let's say we had a tornado and our emergency services are tied up, but we need someone to go out and, walk a block in Moorhead and just do a quick assessment on the damages. These people would be utilized for that. So we got a good start on that, but then due to COVID again, we had to put that on the back burner for now. Posse, same thing. We started meeting again more regular with the posse, having meetings, and that's on hold for now. The end of May, early June, we did activate our Emergency Operations Center 2 separate times for the civil unrest that was taking place in the area. The second time we did have the National Guard activated to assist. Thankfully, they were not needed. They just staged up at the armory in the event we did need additional support. Drone operations were critical in that event. I think I know Steve was part of the EOC at that point and was able to see the value of that. We also used the drone, was very critical in the rail exercise. We've deployed it for several accident and crime scenes. City of Moorhead has used it for, we've allowed them to use it for some different surveys they had going on, like in the wintertime, their turkey count. They were able to fly it over and get aerial photos of, to get a good estimation on their turkey for depopulation purposes. Civil unrest, and then just last week, the compost fire. It was critical with that due to the thermal camera. It actually shows temperatures, so they were able to identify hot spots within the piles and break them up better. And so our control of that is switching from Valley Water Rescue to Moorhead Fire. They will be our operators, but that's kind of been, we were hoping to have it completed by August, but that's on hold now just due to some of the training deals. So the benefit for the county and for us is Moorhead Fire has approximately 14 people going through the training that'll be operators. They have 24-hour staffing. So for us, the deployment time will be probably cut at least in half, if not sooner. So if we had a missing person, instead of maybe an hour response time with those guys being on call, we should have that out on scene within probably a half an hour, even if it's on the east end of the county. So I just wanted to update you guys on that. Another major thing that took place when I came into this role a couple years ago, or a little over a year ago, I guess, we were due for our 5-year hazard mitigation plan update. That is now currently under review with FEMA, and hopefully by October, maybe September, I will have it back from FEMA and be able to present to the board for approval. And then I guess one of the things when we go over my actual budget is trainings. Myself and then the assistant emergency manager, due to not being able to attend many trainings this year, we'll be playing catch up next year on getting our full emergency manager certifications and some other things. So that's just a quick summary of the year's events. If you look at my budget, it starts on page 14, and you'll notice year to date on revenues, it's only showing $10,000. What is missing out of there is the $33,886. That is the grant portion for my position, the EMPG grant portion. The state of Minnesota has that money. They are a little bit slow on getting it allocated due to the civil unrest in the metro. The grants person for HSEM was tied up in their EOC, so that is behind schedule. They are actually, as of last week, they were starting to get that money out. So that is why that is missing. The other $10,000 is from some other grants. Really the only increases to my budget other than the normal the increases in para, salary, and health insurance are would be the association dues and memberships, maybe about I don't know, 10 lines down. I'm increasing that from 2,000 to 2,500, and the reason for that is a couple of the different associations, AMM, they increased their dues slightly, and Nicole Reno, the assistant, needs to get a membership to that. So that's a $500 increase in that. Last year I did increase the training budget. I'm below that now due to COVID, but that was in anticipation of the additional trainings. Well, now that we're going to be playing catch up next year, if you go down to travel and expenses, I'm asking for a $700 increase in that, and that's just due to the fact that next year, and also with Nicole getting up to speed and myself, there'll just be more travel and expenses associated with training. And the other thing Lori and I talked about was, I think we've seen maybe this last year the importance and the multiple applications of our drone. So it's not reflected on here, but I'm asking to add $2,000 for internal service and create a line item for the drone. I do anticipate there is a lot of different tools that work with it that would be of value to us, and then just also as the technology advances, I'm sure costs are going to go up slightly, and maybe the span of life will be more or less. It depends on with the amount of use. I don't know if that will affect that. So I do anticipate a greater need for that.
So, but that's not included in it.
It's not included. Lori, I don't know how she reflects that in here. That was something her and I talked about, that was just increasing what is internal serviced under my budget for drone. But other than that, I think on her budget, it does show the association dues and memberships. I believe she only has a $2,100, so only a $100 increase. That's an error. It should be $2,500. That was the first one I talked about maybe a quarter of a page down. Do you have any questions for me or any concerns?
I was just wondering, as far as the training and stuff, you're not using up as much money this year as you anticipated, but next year increasing it. Do we move that money forward does that become a new request, or do we use some of the money that he saved last year? Do we move that over, or?
Any money left in his budget would go
Back into the general?
Oh, so it turns out to be a new request.
Yeah, and I would anticipate in the future, especially since I really saw the value of when COVID first started and Nicole was taken out of the school, and having someone available to assist with that. I would like to probably get her to more trainings, or whoever the assistant is in the future, to more trainings than they maybe have done in the past, because it was a great asset. And obviously her salary that was previously paid by the schools, we will look at, that was all coded when she came to me, that was all coded under COVID, so I would assume that's going to be a recoverable expense too, either from FEMA or CARES dollars. But yes, training I do just look for in the future in general to be more travel and expenses. So.
Okay, any other questions for Gabe?
Gabe, the federal grant costs that you have here, are those the anticipated costs at our, was it 25% that we pay? Is that what all those numbers on, or that's year to date, the June number, never mind, those are year to date numbers.
Okay. And there's a lot of, I suppose, as you look down the sheet towards the bottom of page 14, all the ones that are coded 283, that would be COVID, 283 indicates COVID expenses. So those would be things that, let's say Joe's equipment or other people who've worked maybe COVID related overtime. So like the para, Social Security and stuff in there, that would be things that anyone throughout the county other than public health, because they have their own COVID code, would fall under here. So that's what those numbers are, if that makes sense. Anything else?
Okay, thank you, Gabe.
All right, thank you.
And off with the big one. Morning, Mark. Morning, Steve.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. We have these out to, I'm gonna reference these later on. So for the overall budget here for the sheriff's office, it's roughly about a 2% increase. That we can, that we're asking for 2021. Some of the items that we're looking at increasing in our budget, you go down the line there for revenues would be police relief aid. We are expecting to get a little bit more through police relief aid coming up. With all the police reform that's going on, we know that $6 million that has been allocated towards law enforcement agencies across the state will continue for the next few years. So we're hoping for $5,000 more from the police relief aid. Another $55,000 with our 2021 Warren PD contract for the LEC. That would be an additional revenue. We did do a decrease in pistol permits. That has historically always been lower than what we have requested over the years. Over the years, it's been 80,000, and historically, it's always been lower than that. So we did drop that down 30,000 in pistol permit revenue. The miscellaneous revenue or refund is $8,700 would be SRO wages under the contracts that we signed with Ulen, Hitterdall, and DDF. And there's one more decrease in the budget, and that is under our medical examiner for autopsies. The average of our autopsies have been going down over the years, so we did minus $14,600 out of our medical examiner budget as well. For the expenditures, we did a $3,000 increase, and that has always, we've always been over in that particular line item, so we did want to increase that to have more of an accurate reflection of for the budget. Also, with meals not related to overnight travel, we're constantly under budget there. Our numbers for transports are staying high. We're seeing the high numbers in transports as it relates to MI transports, along with some of our warrants that are being arrested out of the area that we do have to go and pick up. Our office supplies, we increased $1,500, another a line item that we were constantly under. with the new facility, we're seeing more offices, we have more printers, we have just more office supplies that we're using. Uniforms, our uniform costs are going up, so we increased that by $5,000. Equipment over 500 is a $10,000 increase, and that's what we take our vest money out of. So when we purchase our bulletproof vests, that's where that comes out of. And next year we have a substantial number of vests that we have to buy for people. I think Gabe said it was 12 vests that we were purchasing next year. We do get some of that money refunded back, but not all of it. Therefore, we did have to do an increase there for the equipment over 500.
I know we're switching vests around and they look better. I mean, they look like it's going to work better, but are we required to do that, or?
We're not required to do that. Those carriers that we're switching around, it's a lot better on everybody's back.
Well, I realize that. I was just wondering whether that was a requirement to do that.
It's not. It's more of a health issue for everybody. You know, whenever you're in this job long enough, you wear all this equipment around your waist. It's hard on people's backs, so we're changing it to more of a load-bearing carrier. So you have all your equipment right up here along your waistline, or actually on your belly.
Since some offices still going to be using those, is there a resale value in any of them, or?
We'll attempt to reuse those if the officers' vest sizes don't change over 5 years. We'd be able to reuse those vest carriers. Sometimes after 5 years, though, they do get a little wore out, and we would have to replace them as well. But we do make an effort to reuse them if possible. Also for the special appropriations at the sheriff contingency fund, the state statute allows for $10,000 in that. We did request an additional $5,000 in that, as we do use that at times. If we have a large investigation going on and we have to purchase unforeseen equipment, and we will use that fund as well as if we need to feed people out at those scenes. And then the internal service and just working with Lori, we've always been consistently short in our internal service. So her request, her recommendation was to add another $50,000 in the internal service for the increased vehicle costs. And we are internal servicing more equipment than I think we have in the past. In the past, we've never internal serviced the equipment that goes into the vehicle, such as the push bumpers and center consoles and the cages and the lights and the sirens and things like that. But we're starting to internal service that now, so when it comes to replace that car, it's not such a hit.
Well, yeah, because every time you've come forward with your replacement, you've always had significant dollars available between your original cost salvage value and then selling at the auction. So that was my question. So it's all the other equipment you're trying to catch up on.
Correct, yep.
And that can be how much per vehicle that you could spend?
It can be just about as much as the vehicle. So the vehicle's about 33, and you could be looking at just about that amount for all the equipment with it as well.
So that internal service fund, you're showing a $50,000 increase over last year. Plus, are you asking for another 50 in new requests on top of that?
Yep, I'll get into that request here in just a moment. I just wanted to hit kind of the highlights of our revenue.
Before you get too far down, can I ask a question on, the line like 6302, equipment repair and maintenance, and then below it is the radio equipment repair and maintenance. So specifically the equipment repair, you have spent about half of what is budgeted. Are those items that would qualify for the internal service fund? Could you reduce those areas to help cover what you're asking for the internal service fund increases?
I would have to check with Gabe on the equipment repair and maintenance as far as why you're down in that area. That doesn't come on, that's not auto repair and maintenance where we're generally at. But a lot of that, I believe a lot of that, actually what that was back in the day, that was for the radio towers. Whenever we would have to take care of our own radio towers and things like that, that's where that money came out of. And that's probably an oversight on our part as far as looking at that.
Because I think the one underneath it, the radio equipment repair is closer to what's budgeted.
Correct.
but that may be an area to reduce to help rationalize the bottom. I think, I mean, I appreciate what you're doing. Adding money into internal service for these costs is important, but I want to make sure that we can help. I mean, there's several different maintenance and repair areas. I just want to make sure we can consolidate if possible.
When you trade in a car, I mean, get a new car, does the equipment, you have to buy all new equipment for it too, or can we transfer it? Because you're saying it's almost as much as the cost of the car, but isn't the equipment already there?
It really depends on the car. For example, so Ford, they've been notorious at changing their body styles in the inside of the vehicle every few years now. We used to be able to take a 98 Crown Victoria to a 2011 Crown Victoria were exactly the same. All the equipment would transfer over, but now we're getting to the point of some of this center console equipment, some of the push bumpers, the cages, they won't transfer over into the newer vehicles, so now we're having to buy newer things. We're not buying new radios, we're not buying new cameras, we're not buying new radars for them, but some of our cages need to be new just because of the redesign of the vehicles. And that's been happening now about every 4 years. Ford seems to redesign their vehicles again and then rather to catch up on equipment again.
That's part of the reason for the request for the increase in internal service, because those costs don't go away, and they change on us all the times with upgrades to vehicles.
You know, the 2012, 13, and 14, 15 Ford utilities, they all stayed the same, equipment transferred over. 16, they changed. So now 16, 17, 18, 19, they've all been able to transfer the equipment that we purchased. Now 20, they're changing again on us. And I expect that about 2024, they're going to change on us again. So,
Aside from your budget and stuff like that, I mean, that equipment that doesn't fit in there, can we sell that or not?
we try, yep, we try and sell it. Our vendor that we used on the Code 4 services, he's been very good about, you know, looking out for other agencies, looking out for us. So if we have the ability to sell something, we will. If we can't sell it, we auction it off as scrap up at our auction.
Okay. Thank you.
We're not just throwing that stuff away. Some of the stuff we do, like we have an old camera system, we're not able to sell that because it's already too old for us. It's going to be old for somebody else, and that stuff we have to discard. But what we can auction off, we do auction off. The request that I do have for 2021 is that we do have a deputy that's probably going to get deployed for the year of 2021. And with that being said, I refer back to the graphs that I handed out. As you can see in these graphs, we are busier. So for the graph for calls for service, so the 3-year mark there, we have gone up in our calls for service. We did go down a little bit in April of this year. That was due to COVID, but then we jumped back up, and we have kind of been consistently higher in calls for service throughout the year. Our patrol schedule is tight, and when we have somebody leave for a year, that makes things difficult. And then you try and accommodate sick time, vacation times, and everything like that. It makes it extremely tight on the staff, especially when we have more calls coming in. The one you see for call priority, that's a 4-year comparison. As you can see, we continue to go up in call priority. Priority 1, priority 2 calls for service, they require two deputies or 2 officers to respond to that, and there are times in our schedule where we may only have 3 deputies working. So as you can see, if you're tying up 2 deputies on 1 call for service, it doesn't leave a lot for others. So our call priorities are going up as well. And then the last smaller page here, you can see at times that we are short or we're at minimums or below staffing. So last year we had 223 shifts that we were at minimums or below, and this year we're already at 105. And the second part of that is the times that our patrol lieutenant has covered shift. Last year, he had 61 shifts that he had covered, so that saved the county 610 hours of overtime costs. That's significant. So far this year, it's been 29 shifts that he has had to cover to ensure that we do have adequate staffing out on the road. That's where the new request comes in for the $65,000 would be for the vehicle that we would purchase for that new hire. As far as the wage and benefits for that new hire, it would be a wash, as we're not going to be paying for the deputy that's deployed in 2021. So his wage would come out of that. It would be, we would like to retain that person for 2022, obviously, and with the retirements that are anticipated in 2022, I would not expect there to be a considerable amount of a budget increase there. Also, there's a correction on our request for the budget impact for the internal service. It would actually be $50,000 for the patrol squad and equipment, because we have, Steve found this year in the budget, we kept putting away money for a vehicle that we didn't have. We used to have that mobile work, and we kept putting $1,600 in the internal service for that vehicle, and Steve caught that this year. Therefore, we do have $16,000 in internal service that we would be able to put towards that vehicle. And then, depending on what happens with CARES Act funding, I've been working with Steve and Gabe. It's potential that there's going to be a request possibly for his pickup to be paid out of CARES Act because of how much he's using it for right now.
Gabe's vehicle.
Gabe's new vehicle. If we purchase that this year, that would drop that down as well from the 50. We could actually probably bring that request down to roughly $15,000 to $16,000 for the vehicle. That would be a one-time request this year. Then we would put it into internal service and make it through the natural rotation that Lori would normally do. And again, this would be dependent on if the deputy gets deployed. It's looking very much so that he's going to get deployed in 2021. He has told us that his orders are for January 21, but that could change. If that changes, then this would change as well. If we would not have, we would not make that new hire in 2021.
So total budget impact would be pretty neutral for 21. It's 22 if we get this one FTE approved. In 21, it would affect that budget.
And with it would affect it to, just some quick numbers I think Steve put together this morning was roughly 86,000. But with the anticipated retirements that are coming up, I would suspect that would be a lower number as well.
Any further questions for Steve and Mark?
I'll revisit them two line items that you said and probably adjust them to more reflect it like we did with the pistol gun permits and stuff, because that was way out of whack when you mentioned it last year. And we adjusted for that because right now we're looking at an average of over 30,000 by half the year. So we wouldn't even make that 80 this year.
Yeah.
So next year it'll be reflected a lot closer to what it actually is, because it's such a moving target with the environment and politics and stuff that we don't know on that revenue.
And then taking that adjustment into account, and that would really bring down that request fund as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Mark, I want to thank you. The other night, I know I had to call you for some assistance, and that was quick assistance that you get brought out there. Thank you very much.
No problem. Happy to do that all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess some of the others aren't here yet. Yes, they are. Very good. We'll take you up here right away. Dave and Justin are going to be here for the Highway Department budget.
Good morning.
Morning.
I put a little summary page together, I guess, that I just kind of go through
The four main parts of our budget are 310 is maintenance, 320 is construction, 330 is administration, and 340 is shop. So I'll kind of go through some of the increases and decreases in each one of the four subsections. Maintenance, what we typically do with most of our line items is take a look at trends. What we've seen in the last several years and try, things are pretty steady for the most part. The biggest difference is if we have like several big jobs where we need to buy right away, or if it's a large construction expenditure and that sort of thing, and they kind of go up and down. Most everything does follow our 5-year road plan or our 5-year deficient bridge listings, so we got things kind of laid out for us 5 years at a time. One thing that we did note in the maintenance is what we're getting guidance from based on COVID is there's a pretty strong suggestion of a reduction in state aid, and that'll come in the tune of maintenance as well as construction. We'll talk about that a little later, but as far as maintenance, the state aid maintenance and also the town road allotment as well, and that's just a pass-through that comes through based on how many miles of township roads you have in your county, and it comes in as revenue on the top part and comes out as an expenditure on the bottom. So it's kind of a neutral deal, but we did put a 15% reduction in both those items based on what we're hearing from the state. Overall, we did increase our maintenance labor budget $7,000. I think that's comprised of $5,000 of additional overtime, and I guess a lot of it's a trend, and I hope it goes away, but the last 2 winters have been kind of tough. It seems like it always snows on weekends or holidays, so I guess we put a little additional dollars, $5,000 for overtime and a couple $1,000s for on-call pay. There again, I just feel like if we don't have the guys out there or if they're not available, then we're getting phone calls. You guys are getting phone calls, and I mean, I don't like that. I know you don't like it, and I don't want the perception to look like we're not willing to do work. The state, they run like either a 20 or 24-hour shift. The city of Moorhead, I think they even have around-the-clock shifts, so sometimes we don't look very good if we're not out there, so I put a little dollars in for that.
I will say that it has seemed like it's snowed. Every snow event was like on a Sunday night, and you have to get those roads cleared. Have you talked about adjusting your schedule so that somebody maybe has, a Sunday through a Thursday is their work week?
I guess, it's certainly, I would be open to, we haven't, I guess.
And I mean, however you figure it out, I understand there's a lot of overtime. It's warranted because of the snow events that we did have. But I think you should look at an alternative work week to make sure you don't have a guy that's on overtime coming in on the weekends.
Right. And the union contract covers a lot of that. So even if whether it's overtime or not, if they come in on a weekend, I guess that's kind of how it works.
Well, I mean, maybe you need to be more flexible.
But even if you schedule 1 or 2 people in, would that help much? I mean, would you have to have a whole shift there? Or?
That's, in order to do something like that, I guess what the state does is they have 2 separate crews along the lines of what you're saying. They've got a shift of guys that come in and work this shift, and then a whole nother set come in. We could try to prioritize the busier roads right around Moorhead area within a 15-mile radius or something, but I think something that we could talk about, maybe a highway tracking committee meeting. You want to take the input off Kim a little bit and see what he would say and how he would move forward on something like that.
Well, I know you work different, your crews work different hours in the summer based on, seasonal issues.
Right.
And so maybe it means tweaking what the winter schedule look like. I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but I think there might be a way you could save some money.
Yeah, that certainly is worth looking into. But we have different people that deal in different parts of the county, and you could have one winter storm that can affect the northeast part of the county and nothing in the southwest part.
That happens a lot.
So we'll have to review that, but I think it's certainly worthy of looking.
I would love to have another set of crew guys, even if they were, we do have, I think we're down to 3 part-time snowplow operators now because we've hired a couple more full-timers. If we were able to have more of those type of employer staff available to us, you could do something like that. There's, they get standby time, so there's costs and different things, but if we were able to have another set of guys, that would be great. The next thing that we did is, it fluctuates, but we decreased our uniform line item by $2,700. And what that means is this 2021 is not a boot year for the guys. So this year they got boots, next year they don't. So that dollar goes up and down. But anyway, it was a decrease by $2,700 for that. Road materials, we did put an increase of $50,000 on there, and that's strictly for gravel. We have ramped up the last couple of years. The roads have been so incredibly terrible that we've had to put barricades up closing gravel roads in the spring. In fact, I think just south of Moorhead, south of Dilworth there, we still have road close signs up there because of a couple of heavy operators, people coming in there, and I'm getting pictures of vehicles stuck down, semis are stuck, and it's unbelievable. So I guess we would like to continue to add more gravel. I think it's really helping out in some of the areas that we've done it, and I think we need to keep doing it. We did increase $3,000 to our weed and brush line item, and it kind of piggybacks with, I seen Director Jacobson up here talking about the flood buyouts, and I put $3,000 in our budget for spring as well, because I think these, some of the properties that the county now maintains and owns, it's not going to go away, and if there's issues, now I got a little extra dollars there. We'd like to continue to spray our county roadways up to the tune of about $30,000, and then an additional $3,000 for the flood buyouts. Any other questions on maintenance? The next subsection is construction, which is typically our engineering technicians and our county and township road construction projects. There again, we did use the past year's state aid allotment for estimating revenues, as well as our 5-year construction plan and our town bridge 5-year resolution. The past several years, we've been, I think, nicely conservative. When our state aid allotment bumped from 3.2 up to 3.7, and this current year at 3.9 million, these are funds coming into the county from the gas tax dollars. We've always maintained a 5-year plan budget of 3.2 million, just because we didn't know with the sales for auto parts and leasing, some of those additional dollars that we're getting, they're not like constitutionally dedicated just yet, so they're not super safe. So we've always maintained 3.2 million. So even with a 15% reduction, our projected plans and budgeting should be safe. So that was kind of nice.
That's the 3.8.
Say that again?
That's the 3.8.
Correct. Yep. We did, being that we don't have much grading going on in plan for 2021, we decreased our appraisal expense by $8,000. We left $5,000 in there for 2021 and 2022 projects. We did leave the training expenses flat. Those were ramped up, I believe, this year and last year based on, we got 2 new engineering technicians in order to get those guys fully certified with all their grading and base and bituminous and concrete. But anyway, we left that flat for those couple of new staff we have. We decreased our consulting expenses by $37,000. We left $79,000 for 2021 and 2022 projects. We do still have a lot of bituminous testing, and we've got bridge replacements that require hydraulics that have to be done in order to get a watershed permit. If you rip a bridge out, there has to be an asbestos and contaminated materials report done as well. So we cut that down, but there's still about $79,000 in there. We decreased our engineering supplies just based on a trend. We haven't been spending to the level, so we decreased that by $1,500. And then we don't plan on needing large amounts of right-of-way. I left a little bit of dollars in there for a proposed turn lane project that we're working with the city of Glendon and the state on in Glendon on Park Avenue, but we decreased that by $40,000 as well. So construction subsection is looking pretty good. We're going to have a lot of reductions there. The next subsection is administration, and that's typically Justin and myself, front office staff, and some expenses that gets incurred with that. We decreased our telephone expenses by $1,500, and I don't exactly know why that is, but it had, what comes out of there is our cell phone expenses and our shop internet. And I don't know if some of those expenses have went down a little bit, but we were able to reduce there. Printing, publishing, and advertising, we reduced that by $2,000 based on trends, and I think some of that has to do with what's the current official county paper. So there's like 3 or 4 different options, and some are more expensive than others. So that's.
My question is on overtime. Where does office staff and stuff, and you guys, where's the overtime come in?
I wonder if that doesn't come from the highway accountant, I believe. I think Ann is, it's just, that's something, yeah, I have in here $4,000, is that right? That's for our highway accountant, I guess.
But the 2019 actual was 12,650.
I imagine that has to do with flood, which would have been reimbursed by FEMA, but I think that's why that's so high. During the flooding crisis, that's the only time that I would get overtime. And we never budget for that, but I think Ann's typical budget is somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 for the accountant. In conference registration, we were able to reduce that by $2,000. There's less training needed. Part of that was for, we're really running into trying to make sure we're covered on the bridge inspection portion of our department. We had a long-term bridge inspector retire, and as I go to my county engineer bridge committee meetings, a lot of counties have every new staff that comes in the door goes and gets certified to be bridge inspector, and it's a lot of money. It's 2 weeks down in the cities, it's thousands of dollars.
Yep.
And I don't quite believe that, but I think having just one guy long-term is not good if they quit or get hurt or need help. So we're currently going to have, probably Justin's going to get certified this fall,
And
as well as
one other technician.
Right. So I think we're going to have a little bit better coverage, but I still don't think all 5 of our techs, plus the assistant engineer, needs to be certified. So, but we were able to reduce that because those costs should be incurred in 2020.
How come the travel and expenses is so high?
Travel, I imagine that's for the county engineer conference. The
Well,
conferences.
and, I mean, you used 5,444 in 18, in 19, 4,394, but it's still budgeted at 8,500.
I think some of that is the assistant engineer didn't go that year, so there was expenses that weren't incurred. And then part of it depends on where the conferences are at, if it requires airline flights or not. One of those conferences was in Wisconsin Dells, so it was, you could drive, it's a lot cheaper. So when they're closer, if they're in Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin, they're a lot less than expensive. The other thing that we do have, you probably noticed, is I don't do it very often, but we have a new request. We'd really like to get a different setup in the assistant engineer's office. When I started in 2001, the desk that I used was the previous assistant engineer, Jim Wetstein, and I believe they put this together in the mid-90s. I used it, it's been passed down to 3 different staff. Since then, we've had to have the shop come in and weld plates together, and we have three different tables and a desk all cobbled together. We'd like to make a request to get a new desk for Justin in his office that would have kind of a corner type style with some file cabinets and then overhead storage. We do have we've been working with Christensen Business Furniture.
Yep.
We're just trying to
Get an estimate.
Put things together, and I guess I'd really like to see if we couldn't give him something a little better to work in rather than all the, the thing, the welds will break, and it makes for a much nicer working conditions for him. The last item I have is the shop. That one there is a little bit, I don't know, it's mostly driven by weather and what we get for, how hard the winters are is the biggest thing. We did increase our utility expenses by $5,000, and that has to do with our joint facility as well as the outlying shops. We did decrease the gas expenses by $5,000, so it was kind of a wash. I think a lot of that has to do with the HVAC upgrade that we did at the joint facility. Our building is running a lot more efficient, as well as maybe there was a little bit, might have been a little warmer, so some of the propane expenditures at the outlying shops were a little less. We're really starting to notice some of our outlying shops showing their age and needing more repairs. We did increase our building repairs and maintenance by $15,000. As we're spending the dollars, I could budget less, but at the end of the year when the doors go down or there's other repairs that have to be done at these shops, the expenditures are there. We did increase our equipment repair and maintenance by $10,000. we dug into this one quite a bit to see what's going on, because, you know, most of our equipment is fairly new. I try to keep most everything on warranty, but last year alone, we spent $65,000 on cutting edges. So it's just like for the motor graders and the trucks, it was, you know, scraping on ice when we did get bad weather. A lot of times we had freezing rain, or if we had snow conditions that required a lot of scraping. That was probably the most expenses we've ever had on cutting edges. But so I feel we need to increase about $10,000 on equipment repair. Our fuel budget is a real wild card, I guess. I know we went over on that one too, but we did have the flood, so I'm hoping some of those costs are offset through the equipment hours that we get back from FEMA. But we would like to increase our fuel budget by $10,000, just taking the best guess at capturing where we're going to be at. If we have a good 2021, good spring, and a really good fall, we may not come anywhere near spending that much money. And our equipment over 500, we'd like to increase that by $4,000. Typically, we've been buying small to mid-size shop type equipment, which would be like air compressors, or if it's a pressure washer or other tools. Anything over $500 has to come out of this line item. And before, I think we had, I had $8,000 in there, and it doesn't take a lot of larger equipment to exceed $8,000. So we were looking at possibly bumping that up either $2,000 to $4,000. And what I did do is I bumped that. That may not, that may show $10,000 on your sheet, but what I'd like to do is have that one say $12,000, and then the building repair, I would bring that back down by $2,000. So the building repair, I'm going to have that at $98,000 instead of $100,000, and the equipment over 500, I'd like to have that at $12,000.
That's what's showing on here.
Okay, so it did get changed. Okay. I think we're trying to keep up with some of the equipment at some of the shops, and different things will come along. A lot of time, we've been buying a lot of things from the state, different, like conveyors and things that we can help us do shouldering. I think we bought a water tank that was a really good deal. A few years ago, we bought that big blue sign truck at an extremely discounted rate.
I just want to mention on when you go to your conferences, when are they normally in April, right?
Yep, correct.
One of the things that we need to watch closely is where we are with COVID. Last thing we need to do is have both our engineer and assistant engineer going to the same place, under these circumstances.
So there'll be a big savings there for 2020.
I think we might want to, I know sometimes it's beneficial for you both to go, but I think under the sake of risk, I would have real concern with both of you. And again, we can leave it in there for right now, I think, but with the idea in mind that if things are still not well, and by next March, we should
definitely
rethink that.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions on any of the subsections, or? It was kind of disheartening to have that big reduction in state aid, where I think that played a pretty big part, several $100,000. In talking with MnDOT, some people are suggesting there might be closer to a 10% reduction rather than a 15%. So I'm hoping they're right. That will be a little less of a decrease to our revenues.
Well, I know we haven't seen, in sales tax collections, we haven't really seen what we thought might be a kind of a kick in the pants, but
Sure.
It hasn't really happened. So.
Anything else?
Okay. All set with that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for our reductions. We got recorder, Kim Savacho, sending that. Thank you.
Hi. Excuse me. Good morning.
Morning.
I guess we'll start with the revenues for the 2021 quarter budget. A lot of the revenues have stayed the same. The one substantial increase of this 12.5% would be under my general service charges. That is for my online revenues. I have seen an increase of people using my online services since COVID started, and they're liking them, so I'm anticipating people continuing with those services even after COVID has seen and come down. The other expenses on here, the compliance fund, that was met with the committee and passed earlier this year in March. And I did put an increase under our surcharges, that's our vitals fees. We've been seeing a huge increase of people needing their documents for the real ID, and so I did increase that for revenue. Any questions on the revenues? Moving on to the expenses, my increase in the top lines are all employee salary related. The only other increase on there is at the very bottom under Laredo, the computer software. That is my software expenses. As I have more people subscribing to the online thing, I do pay my vendor a portion of those fees for support and service of that. Any questions on any of my expenses? I did move a few items, decrease them based on what I have been seeing in the past, not needing as much, so some small decreases there.
Okay.
What I did hand out was just part of the technology fund and compliance fund. I just wanted to, these are parts of my budget that actually assist other county departments, so just kind of wanted to bring that forward and remind everybody that even though my compliance fund is spending $105,000, it's not necessarily for my office, it's for the different land records offices to maintain some of these services. And then the other part of it, I just kind of wanted to give you a little graph of our revenue for 2020 versus 2018 and 2019, just to kind of see how COVID has impacted my office a little bit. For real estate, we did see a drop in recordings, but we have seen a substantial increase, and we are way above where we were in June of 2018 and 19. And same with the vitals fees. In the beginning of the beginning of 2020, we already had a substantial increase for those services, and then we saw the drop when our office was closed, and now we're getting back up to where we were.
Okay.
Any other questions for me? For the recorder's office?
So how close is your budget with your, looking at 0.62 or what? How much of an increase are you looking at in your budget, or is there?
Well, for my expenses, the increase would be 8.98%, and my revenue is an increase of 2.4%.
No, just your computer software is 8.9.
Oh, yeah, just my, sorry, yeah, line down, so just 0.62%
Yeah,
for my
okay.
expenses.
So that's very good.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
So have you, have you had a chance to research your department in terms of additional COVID-related expenses for this year so far?
Yeah, we have, I did purchase a laptop so I could have some remote work done. I'm going to be looking at some office furniture, getting a quote for adding to our existing office furniture. To add some
That
bit
was,
more partition.
and that's COVID-related?
Yes, yep. That
And
was
that's all you're working with Steve on that then?
Yeah, I
to-
haven't gotten back with him yet, but yes, I will.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next thing we've got is support concerning Prairie Lakes Municipal Solid Waste Authority's insurance coverage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be very brief because you've been here a long time today. But I want to start out with just a couple of definitions for anybody that's still watching. I'm going to be talking about MCIT. That's basically Minnesota County's Intergovernmental Trust. And what that is a joint powers entity made up of Minnesota counties and associated public entities that pool resources to provide property, casualty, and workman's compensation coverage to the members. Essentially what it is, it's an insurance company for counties, and in this case, Prairie Lakes. And Prairie Lakes, for those who don't know, we're a member. Clay County is a member of Prairie Lakes, and it's comprised of 5 counties. We take approximately 8,100 tons of garbage over to Perham. They process the garbage into RDF, which is refuse derived fuel. It's burned and incinerated, providing steam for a couple of industries over there. What I have before you today is there have been some problems with MCIT finding a carrier to provide insurance for property insurance and equipment replacement insurance for Prairie Lakes, and also probably 4 other waste energy facilities throughout the state of Minnesota. It's a total of about 17, 18 counties that are affected by this. What we're asking in this letter is essentially asking that Prairie Lakes, along with these other counties that have waste energy facilities, can go out and try and seek other options as far as insurance, so we can make sure that we have insurance next year. One of the things that we did have happen last year, or I'm sorry, we were insured through MCIT last year themselves. If we do not find an appropriate insurance coverage, it could have a significant impact on the tipping fee and the overall budget of Prairie Lakes. So this letter is pretty critical, and you know, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. Kevin has been much more involved with this, and part of that is the remote meetings. Sometimes I hear on the telephone, and sometimes I don't hear as well. So maybe Kevin can explain a little more about what the concerns are.
Well, I think the background information you gave is good. Right now, you know, we originally, I think we originally, our building and maintenance type of insurance coverage here 2 years ago was about $90,000 a year. Then last year, MCIT came back in and said that because of the changes that were made, they'd still cover us, but they would pick up 80% of the increased cost, and we'd still be responsible for 20% of the increased cost. That 20% of the increased cost was $77,000. So that was kind of thrown at us for this year that we didn't expect in our budget. Now MCIT has come back and said that starting next year, you know, if they can even maintain the coverage, that MCIT will not cover any of it on the building insurance. In other words, the entire insurance will be our responsibility, and that number would go up to in excess of $500,000 a year. It's and as Kirk said, that's, you know, when we incorporate that number, if we kept everything else the same in our budget, we would see up to a 12% increase in tipping fees just because of that one line item. So this letter is it's critical, and there's also some concern that because MCIT will no longer carry our building insurance, that they might also want to drop our liability insurance and all the other insurances. So this letter, on behalf, we're hoping all counties will support this. We'll state that although we're going to be out there looking for additional building liability insurance, or building insurance, we want MCIT to continue the coverage of liability and workman's comp and all of those things. So, and that's addressed in if you look at this letter, in bullet point 1 talks about that. So it's kind of critical, and we're hoping then that each of these, you can see that this letter was approved by our Prairie Lakes Authority, and that we sent copies to all the board chairs of all of the counties that are members of waste energy facilities in Minnesota. And we're hoping that all of those counties will then pass the same resolution. That's kind of what the request is here, so.
One thing I should point out, Mr. Chairman, and Kevin has touched on it, is that virtually all the other resource recovery facilities are affected as well. We are not the only
Right.
ones that are affected, but these other county facilities are affected as well. And so it's a pretty significant issue.
Why isn't MCIT, why aren't they covering this part? Aren't they, isn't that what they're there for, to give us insurance, or? There's something I don't understand.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a $64,000 question. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of concerns. Last year, it was the same thing as was mentioned earlier. At the last minute, MCIT stepped up to the plate and did the right thing. This year, they have not been willing to do that. One of the concerns I had early on, and I think that Commissioner Whalen and Commissioner Campbell, who are part of the group, we were a little concerned because it wasn't getting the traction that it needed to get, and now it's getting the traction it needs to get. But again, I'm not sure exactly why they don't. I don't think they understand waste energy facilities.
The problem was that the underwriters who were writing the insurance basically told MCIT that they were no longer interested in insuring, even from a secondary insurance, reinsurance standpoint. They weren't interested in doing the reinsurance on these facilities. And as you recall, I think Commissioner Gross, you came to one of those at one of the was it the annual meeting we had, and we did have this topic with MCIT, and we asked the question, well, why won't you cover these facilities, but you can cover jails and those type of things? And their reply was that according to the underwriters, the concern is the boilers and the potential for fires that can happen in these facilities. So whether or not we agree with that, that's
Yeah, I have a tough time following that, I guess, to say, well, you got some potential stuff that may cause damage, so therefore we're not gonna insure you.
Yeah.
So what are you insuring us for? The stuff that nothing happens to?
Well, yeah.
It's just, I'm trying to understand the concept. Why, aren't they there to give us insurance?
I think the problem comes down to is that if MCIT can't buy the reinsurance coverage, then these premium dollars rise to the level that they do. And,
okay.
And so,
if they can't buy it, where are we gonna buy it?
Right. Well, we have to go to, we have to look at a separate market. It's not that they can't buy it, it's the price that they pay for it,
Mr. Chairman, that also brings up another issue. I mean, is that, and I didn't realize this, but I learned through this process that if one group is actually trying to find the insurance, that it shuts off any other opportunity.
Right.
So what that means is that if MCIT is out there trying to get this insurance on our behalf, Prairie Lakes can't go out and trying to find the insurance on their own. And it's insurance business is kind of goofy in that regard. I thought it was kind of interesting. So essentially, that's what this letter is asking for, is to ask permission to let us do that.
So you're gonna straighten this all out for us now?
I think Commissioner Campbell's on top of this. I think he's the one that's going to get it squared away.
Well, it's going to be a large.
Yeah, I can see could possibly cost us some
large
money,
group
or
effort.
increasing the tipping fees. It's just, that's all going to be a big expense to the.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that's exactly it, and I think that's one of the reasons. I think all these counties that are involved with this are working very hard to come up with a solution. So.
Okay.
I'll make a motion for the letter.
Okay, we got a motion to forward this letter on to the MCIT.
If I can, I think it would be to support this.
The letter of support.
Letter of support, yeah. And I would second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to send on this letter of support to the MCIT. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now committee reports. Kevin, you want to start us out?
Yeah, I had, on Wednesday, just give me 1 second. On Wednesday, July 22nd, I had the Prairie Lake Solid Waste meeting, and the primary topic was of course what we just talked about, with the exception that we did go over some, how this might impact our 2021 budget and tipping fees. And we are looking at, if this does happen where we have to pay that full $500,000, we might look at reducing on a 1-year basis the amount of internal service fund dollars we put in to help buy down that 12% increase to maybe a 6%. So that's kind of where we're at there. Then that afternoon I came back and we had a Diversion Authority public outreach meeting. The news there is we have the Diversion Authority has hired a new engineer that's actually on the diversion staff now. His name is Chris Bakigard, and so we were introduced to him. And then there were other items of planning going forward and reports from the Corps and so on and so forth. Then we had a CARES Act committee at 3:30 that afternoon, and we've had quite a bit of discussion on that this morning, so I won't go into any more of that. Then on Thursday morning we had another CARES Act meeting. So these things are really, when you have to spend that $7.8 million in federal money and you only get a few months to do it, it's going to take a lot of effort. So, and then at 3:30 that day, we also did have the actual Diversion Board of Authority meeting. Typical stuff on that. We did go into executive session to talk about litigation matters. And then yesterday afternoon, we had a landfill construction meeting, and I think there's a little bit of concern right now in regards to the contractor hasn't been out there for a couple weeks, and we have some deadlines that need to be met, so there's some concern there. And I suggested that our semi-monthly meetings, or every bi-weekly meetings, I guess you'd call them, that we make sure that those people are in attendance at those meetings so that we can ask those questions. And that concludes my report.
I had mostly the same meetings, Prairie Lakes and the Diversion Authority and landfill construction. Yeah, I just echo Kevin's issues with the landfill construction meeting. Hopefully they'll get things worked out here, because there's only a little over a month left till things were supposed to be substantially done. So that's it for me.
Okay, I didn't have any meetings. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Tuesday, we had Highway Department pre-meeting for budgets. The following day, I had the Sheriff's pre-meeting budgets, and that afternoon, again, Commissioner Campbell and Wayland have mentioned, we met with city leadership to discuss the collaboration on the CARE Act's business relief fund. On the 23rd, again, we had another coronavirus relief fund. We had that later that day, we had a county management where Kathy McKay provided an update. We talked about Executive Order 20-81, the mask mandate, and how that will impact the county. We did send out information on Friday to our employees and laying out the expectations. That afternoon, we met with Tim Dent, Mark Sloan, Kathy McKay, and Joe Olson on a variety of different issues. On the 24th, we met with had a meeting with some of the county or city leadership to discuss follow-up questions from our city meeting on Wednesday. Participated yesterday in the landfill construction meeting that's been addressed.
Just one last thing, the primary election is approaching on August 11th. Historically, Lori and her staff have one Saturday where they have extended hours to help with absentee voting. That is August 8th. Currently, our courthouse is closed for appointment only, but the request before the board this morning would be to allow the courthouse to be opened on the 8th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., which would allow absentee voters to come in and ask questions. There'll be court security will be here, and that will save the employees from having to run out to every car that came in the parking lot during that time frame.
Okay, we need a motion to that effect.
I would so move.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Kevin, a second by Grant, to open on August the 4th to also supply security. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
That concludes my report.
Okay. Brian, you got any words of wisdom for us?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing for me.
Okay, we're adjourned.